Action.
Hey, thank you, Justin, very much for that introduction. My name is Lee, also known on the lounge as Widebrim. Anyway, we're going to talk about the transition period. Basically, at the end of World War II, we saw a change. They saw a change in ties, and this is a good example of a transition model. It has a woven brocade in it, but if you notice, it also has a tipped lining, something which you didn't see very much before the mid-40s. They were out there, but usually you would see this, where there's a lining inside. So this is sort of a transition tie. It's a good width, but this is something that could have been seen even before the war, as far as the width, even the length. The length is probably about, I'm guessing, 48 inches, which would have been okay for that time period. Now, I have another one here, which also is a transition model. Not too wide, probably about 3 1/4 inches. It's not lined, but by the length, I can tell that it's probably just after the war. The manufacturer label was often featured, like right here, on the back side of the small blade. This was tailored by Como. In fact, I picked this up on eBay for about $2.50. It was mistakenly listed as a 70s tie. Nobody else bid on it, so my fortune. Anyway, so these are the ties you would have seen in during World War II, films like Double Indemnity, Murder My Sweet, etc. Now, there's a theory that when the GIs came back from the Second World War, yeah, they got tired of olive drab, of khaki, navy blue, etc. I think Justin may have touched upon that. And the theory is that they wanted bright, new, bold colors. So, after the war, there was a men's fashion statement, and it was referred to as the bold look. So, basically, you went from ties that were not bad looking, but sometimes not extraordinary, to bright, bold ties, like this. I particularly like this one a lot. This is a botany tie. I think it's 100% virgin wool, and you can see here basically that it's making a statement. This is something that, you know, a GI coming out from Europe or Pacific would say, hey, you know what, I want to get as far away from the service maybe as possible, and this is something, although it looks like to me like explosions, but you never know. Anyway, and again, the tie would have been, at that time, would have been approximately 48 inches. They would have sold for $1.50, $2 on the average, and mostly wool. You've got silk, of course, after the war, and you have rayon. The bold look period was also known for its geometric figures, like this one right here. And this has no label, but as you can see also it is lined. That kind of picks it for a post-World War II tie. The length is probably about 50 inches. The width is probably at least a good 3 1/2, judging by more or less. So basically ties, they kind of went back in that design. They went back into Art Deco, which Art Deco kind of ended around 1941 or so. But for ties after the war, the manufacturer and designers decided to go harkening back to those days. Why? We're not really sure. But that's an example of an early kind of geometric tie. My last one, at least for this segment, is one I particularly enjoy. This is a Van Heusen Van Cruise tie. This came out, I believe, about 1947 or so, we believe. And this is basically the 7 Wonders of the World series. And this is, of course, the Tomb of Mausolus, okay, where we get the term, of course, mausoleum. And unlike the earlier ties, you have the design on both sides, inside and out. And this is one I've worn before, and it's a collectible. In other words, it's a tie that I've seen. I picked it up for $2, of course, but I've seen ties like this on eBay, $20, $25, because they are collectible as far as design. So that's a little bit of the beginning of the bold look period. With that, I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Justin.
Go.
Thank you, Lee. Let me go a little bit further into this. After World War II, the interesting thing was that ties not only got bolder, but they had holdovers from the previous period, because the tie manufacturers and their lack of ability to get completely up and running with new designs and everything else just harkened back a little bit to the Art Deco design, and they went with it. And it was really popular. I mean, here's something that we remember from the old Space Invaders movie, but we're talking 1940s, Van Heusen, Van Splendor, and it would be something that a man who came back from World War II would wear. It's lined, has a pattern, and it would be something that they would carry over. They carried it over, and it was such that the tie manufacturers got in such demand with these new designs that they reached out to the artists and such of the day to come up with new designs and new patterns and to figure different things to bring out, and they were knocking out ties like you couldn't believe. They were moving from things like this, which is still sort of having an Art Deco influence to it. It's got the checks in there, and it's got the honeycomb design. It's an arrow from the period. And then they transitioned to even hand-painted. This is a hand-painted tie, and probably even airbrushed to some extent. The hand paints went from a hand-painted design that's more intricate to something that was airbrushed, to even some stenciling with accents and other such things. But I'll let you go on with that. Also, you find all kinds of different materials in the 1950s and 60s. You had wool, square bottom, thin tie, so you could see completely the difference between 40s tie and later 50s and 60s ties. The most common of these, and ones that you see quite often, are Rooster brand. And Rooster had the square bottom wool ties you see often, but this is unusual in the sense that it's an arrow, all wool, made in the USA, of course. And all ties at that time were made in the United States from material likely made here. That all changed later, but another example of a wool tie, probably mid to late 50s. Another Wembley, all wool. But the whole impetus of it was that you had ties that were all bold and loud, and it's so much so that some people say they were the ties that blind. But in truth, what you had was a tie that had personality. And then when the 50s came in, it became referred to as pretty bland. It's thin, it's bland. There's very small motifs sometimes, and once in a while, this is about the extent of loud that you're going to get from a 50s tie. It's turquoise, it's got a black X, it's got a griffin on it. It's very common to have a small figure on it, and maybe a little bit of detail like that. But that was about it. They moved to a much more conservative tie.
If you would, give me just a moment. If I
Great tie, I like that.
It is an interesting, is with the 50s ties, is you have this very planned, geometric, very balanced.
Right, it's not abstract.
Very much
balanced.
So it's planned, it's geometric, it's balanced. There's nothing really that'll stand out and scare you in a 50s tie that you'll find. It's aside from the color of this tie, that's about as scary as you're going to get.
The color's unique.
The X here, that is really unusual for something of that time.
It goes hand in hand with the culture.
Right.
The Sputnik generation too.
Right.
This time
and you can see on the back how how the pattern is interestingly budded up.
Isn't that true?
But this is...
I would like to have seen this. Hold on. This would have been nice to have seen on the front.
Yeah.
In a way, like the upside down
but it was probably just a little bit too much for the time.
And that is, again, it's like, you know, just to throw in, is we have to remember that is we start running into the concept of, it's like corporate business, like IBM, you know, that type of thing. And so you have this, and it's almost like stoic. And for that, it's like, that's kind of fairly loud for that type of thing. That really, it makes a statement, but it's such a repressed sort of time that's, you know,
it's the repressed statement for the time.
You probably would not have seen that at the office, probably.
Probably not. You had office ties, which would have been.
I don't know about that either.
Even bland, you know.
This would have been more. Something like that.
Yeah, well.
There you go. There you go.
But this is a little bit later. 60s model.
Early 60s.
And talk about minimalist. There's a couple stripes on here. You can barely see that there's a couple stripes on here, but it's there. It's no name, which is not unusual. Many people remove the tag when they bought the tie, and but aside from that, you would have something like this. When you see Ward Cleaver and in Leave It to Beaver, he's probably wearing something like this, maybe a little wider, and that's it. That would be what he had. But
it's Mr. Drysdale, the banker guy.
Exactly.
You know,
it was very much for that time.
All right. We should mention that though later. You about ready?
Okay.